This is the information session during the public comment period for the 23-24 California Farm to School Incubator Grant Program. The public comment period is going from November 3rd, or sorry, we have two info sessions. There's one on November 30th, that's today's session, which I said is being recorded. And then there's one on December 6th. So two opportunities for live feedback and Q&A and that sort of thing. And these info sessions are part of the public comment period for this program. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. Okay, next slide, please. So like I said, this info session is being recorded. So we're gonna be tracking this, posting it on our webpage. So just be ready for all that. I don't think it records our faces as part of that, maybe just mine as the presenter, but be prepared. Okay, next slide. So for public comment period, I think a lot of the time the government gets a bad rap for the public comment period, thinking we don't actually want to hear from you. We absolutely do want to hear from you on how we can better design this program. The things that we're always thinking of when we're designing a new round of grant funding is how can we simplify the funding opportunities? How can we help people apply? How can we celebrate and validate the work that is being done and not really ask people like change everything in order to fit into a grant funded box? And then how can we create lasting impact? These are public dollars with a big goal to transform the school food system. So how can we do that best and most effectively? We also have guiding practices that inform our design. So at CDFA, we have a regional staff. There's a bunch of regional staff on here. You'll see them in the chat. We want to provide support and technical assistance to our grantees and our network partners. We offer office hours and peer-to-peer learning opportunities for people to share best practices. We got a really nice note from our friends at Sierra Harvest yesterday in Nevada County. They were saying, oh, I was just on the phone with Amanda Harvey in Fresno talking about these different topics. So there's all this cross-pollination throughout the state. It's a really powerful thing that gets to happen with our program. And you can see it in the chat too. Just people are everywhere. So it's really exciting. So this public comment period is part of this culture of support and collaboration. Okay, the purpose of the California Farm to School Incubator Grant Program is to award competitive grants to support projects that cultivate equity, nurture students, build climate resilience, and create scalable and sustainable change. So those are our biggest buckets that we could think of there from our farm to school roadmap. Within the purpose, we have funding priorities, and you're going to see that these funding priorities go across all 4 grant tracks. So we're going to dive into those later, but these are the things that are like our North Stars, our guiding lights for us. So one of the first funding priorities is to engage students from underserved communities. Second is to include small to mid-sized California food producers. And then this one, I'm gonna blend it together as we go as to our targeted priority producer groups. But those are to include veteran California food producers, socially disadvantaged California food producers, and or limited resource farm households in California. And then additionally, it's to include California food producers who utilize climate smart agriculture practices. Those include climate smart ag production systems like certified organic or transitioning to certified organic, or other regenerative strategies that increase resilience to climate change, improve the health of communities and soil, protect water and air quality, increase biodiversity, and help store carbon in the soil. It also includes this year practicing sustainable pest management, which is a new addition. There's additional priorities, which are to distribute awards geographically across California to the extent possible. So we want to make sure that there's equitable access to the funds. And then we're also setting aside, it's proposed that we're going to set aside up to 10% of all available grant funding for awards for tribal governments and tribal-based nonprofits. And this is to ensure that our funds can support tribal entities. Okay, next slide. So here's the 4 funding tracks as an overview. Track 1 is the Farm to School TK through 12 Procurement and Education Grant. We try to be really clear in the title as to what the grant will fund. So track 1 is the TK through 12 Procurement and Education Grant. Track 2 is the Farm to School Technical Assistance Grant. Track 3 is the Farm to School or Farm to Early Care and Education Grant. And track 4 is the Farm to School Producer Grant. No, this year you cannot apply to multiple tracks, but you can apply if you have an existing grant with us. So in this info session, here's what we're going to do. That was like the base, that was like foundation information about the grant. But here's what we're going to dive into in this session. We're going to talk through an overview of each proposed track. So there's going to be one slide on that. Then we're going to have a slide on proposed eligibility for the track. Then a slide on the proposed funding track details, like the grant term, award amounts, allowable costs, and reporting. Then we'll have a slide on the proposed application and scoring. And then we'll have a past project example. It's super, super important here to know that all of this is proposed and we want your feedback and guidance. And all good feedback is specific. And so if you're going to write a public comment, we would love to have you say, the proposed award amount in track 2 is not high enough. It needs to go to $18 million. So you provide exactly what the problem is and exactly what the solution is that you would propose. That's what's most helpful for us. Sometimes we don't know, and that's why we are having this, to have you answer it for us, because you guys know, because you're living and breathing. So it's really important that you recognize that that feedback needs to be as specific as possible, unless it's just, you guys are so great, we love everything you're doing, you know, that's fine. Send that anytime. So that's great. And then the other piece is, we're not getting into the nitty-gritty details on this webinar. I can't read the entire RFA to you. They're long and detailed documents that really that dive deep into the weeds on what's allowable and what's not. Just for example, the scorecards that we have on the webinar just have the category and the scoring amount. On the actual RFA documents for each track, it has the total, like it has a description of that thing, it has the questions within each section. So a lot of opportunity to give direct feedback there. And all of those things, you can find them on our webpage. So the detailed tracks, there's an RFA document and then one link for each track. So you can really dive into all of that. Okay. Okay, track 1, we're getting into it here. Thank you, Rachel, for putting that in there. That's the link to the webpage that has the full documents that you guys can look at. That's in the chat now. Okay, so track 1 is the TK through 12 Farm to School Procurement and Education Grant. Here's the overview slide. It's proposed that track 1 will fund individual public school districts, county offices of ed, charter schools, and tribal schools in California that are school food authorities to establish new or expand existing farm to school programs. And these programs need to do two things. They need to have a procurement element and an educational element. For procurement, they need to procure California grown or produced whole or minimally processed foods, and those foods need to be incorporated into school meal programs, especially food from producers that utilize climate smart ag practices, from small to mid-sized food producers, veteran food producers, socially disadvantaged food producers, and or limited resource farm households in California. So that's the procurement element. Projects also need to engage students in hands-on food education opportunities, especially standards aligned and culturally relevant opportunities led by credentialed or certificated educators that complement the school meal program's procurement efforts. So this is a little bit evolved from past years to be more specific about standards aligned educational efforts, and it's a little bit more specific on culturally relevant and led by credentialed or certificated educators. So those are the proposed new overview for track 1. It's also optional that if you want to employ farm to school staff and or offer farm to school professional development, that would be allowable and is encouraged here. Okay. Here's the proposed eligibility for track 1. It's a public school, a county office of ed, a charter school, or a tribal school, and they have to be a school food authority in California currently operating the National School Lunch Program. So that's the proposal. And the reasoning behind that is that we want to make sure we're leveraging these federal dollars to do local good. So if you're operating the National School Lunch Program, you're getting federal dollars and investing them locally. Okay. Here are the details of this track. The proposed grant term is up to 2 years. So that'll be released. We'll know those exact dates when the final RFA comes out, and that will be included in that document. There's a funding formula in track 1. For each of those eligible entities, they'll get $15 per student enrolled in the 2022-23 school year. So it's a simple thing. You look at your enrollment and multiply by 15. The minimum award is $200,000, and the maximum award is $1.5 million. So if you run that formula, $15 per student times your enrollment, and it doesn't hit 200K, then we want you to bump up your award to 200,000. If you run that formula, $15 per student times your enrollment, and it comes out to over 1.5 million, then it's required that you back off that number down to 1.5 million. The reason for 200,000 that we've proposed is that it's a person and some stuff. That's how we describe it. You need to fund staff, and they need to have materials and supplies to do what they need to do. So that's our thinking behind $200,000 on that minimum number for that. For allowable costs that are proposed, it's anything you need to buy more whole or minimally processed foods and educate students about them. So that could be California grown food for school meals or hands-on learning, infrastructure, equipment, supplies, staff, labor for procuring or processing local food, travel time if you're going to go visiting farms and that sort of thing, contractors if you're going to bring in a contractor to get expertise, and then indirect costs are also allowable. For reporting, the proposal is that there's a beginning interview where if you're selected for a grant, our team will meet your team. That'll be the beginning interview. Then there's a pre-survey that you'll fill out where we get baseline numbers, and then a final interview. There's also quarterly reporting and check-in where you're just sharing glows and grows, what's going well, how can we help? And then there's regular financial reporting. This is a reimbursement grant, so that regular financial reporting can be how you're getting reimbursed. You know, you're sending in invoices. Yeah. Okay. And then this isn't the last slide on track 1. There's 2 more. Sorry. Here's the proposed scorecard for track 1. You can see that some of these categories in the application are unscored and some of them are scored. Again, there's much more detail in this on the web page in the track 1 specific link to track 1. It has a bunch more information that you can look at. It has the questions that are in each section, as well as the proposed scoring amount in them. So you could see how it's broken out. You know, it's not just one question, it's 35 points. So here's the categories: foundational information, funding formula and dollar amount requested, and project team. Those aren't scored, you just have to tell us. Project team and organizational commitment, which is how does Farm to School fit into your grant? Or how does Farm to School fit into your mission as an organization? That's up to 15 points. The community needs section is our highest point total, and that gets points for engaging students from underserved communities. Project title and summary, not scored. And then you'll see 2 30-point sections here. The procurement work plan and budget and the education work plan and budget are both worth 30 points is what's proposed. And that's because procurement and education are equally valued in the eyes of this grant. You really need both together in order to increase that student consumption of local foods and provide the education that we're hoping. So 30 and 30 there. Jennifer, thank you for your question on how are underserved communities defined. Amy, is that something you could cut and paste into the chat and I could read out? Yeah. I want to make sure I get the language exactly right. So Amy will put that in the chat and then I'll read it and circle back. The procurement work plan section includes points for those priority producer groups that we had flagged earlier. So is your project including small to mid-sized producers? Is your project including veteran food producers, socially disadvantaged food producers, or limited resource farm households? And does your project include producers who utilize climate smart ag practices? So that's what's in there. And then there's a 10-point section on project viability, which is can this project be sustained? And basically, does your budget make sense? Is this, if you said you're going to do all this work with educators, but then there's no funding for an educator, you know, we need a spot to really provide that feedback in the scorecard. So that's the proposal there. You'll notice it's out of 120 points. That's That's the total, 120. That's how it worked out when we wanted to prioritize what we wanted to prioritize. So again, if you want to provide feedback on this, would love for you to go into the RFA docs, specifically point out each section and ask questions, or say this section should be worth 5 more points, or whatever it is that you think. Okay. Here's a project example from 2022 of a funded Track 1 project. It was Yucaipa Cali Mesa Joint Unified School District, 13 schools that they have in their district. Their award amount was $150,000. This year, the minimum award has increased to $200,000. So this year they'd get even more funding for their project. And the activities included providing hands-on local farm field trips that incorporate next generation science standards. So they had an education element tied to the standards, and they had the procurement piece where they're increasing procurement of seasonal fruits and vegetables from local farms for school meals, including the farm providing field trips. So you can see that's a full circle thing here. The education is tied to the procurement, it's tied to the school meal program, it's tied to the standards, tied to local producers. So all of those things coming together in order to make a positive impact for their community. That's Track 1. Okay, pausing for tea. Okay, so now we're gonna come back here to Track 2. This is the Farm to School Technical Assistance Grant. One of the goals with our grant program is that we're trying to fund the entire school food support system. So Track 1 is for the schools and the educators. Track 2 is for the support orgs. Track 3 is for early care and education, which is the feeder program. And then Track 4 is for the producers and aggregators that bring the food to the school. So we're trying to go across the whole system here. So the technical assistance grant, it's proposed that it will fund farm to school technical assistance organizations to help California school food authorities and California food producers implement resilient and sustainable farm to school programs. Technical assistance projects must build school nutrition educator or producer capacity to implement farm to school programs, and they must focus technical assistance in one of the following categories. You either choose the school food bucket, which is helping California school food authorities implement farm to school procurement programs, or you would choose the education bucket, which helps California school food authorities implement hands-on food education programs in TK through 12 settings, especially programs that are standards aligned, culturally relevant, and incorporate credentialed or certificated teachers, and complement school meal programs. Or you choose the producer training bucket. So you're helping California food producers sell products to California school food authorities. So in the past, Track 2 required these regional partnerships, and there were these different options. And instead this year, we aim to simplify this to allow experienced technical assistance organizations to just lean into their expertise. So if you've been working on school food and you have experience in that, then just choose the school food category. If you're an experienced education organization in California, which we're so lucky here to have so many school garden organizations and teacher training orgs, that you just focus on education. Or if you've been working with producers and helping them navigate the complexities of school food, there's an opportunity for you to do outreach to the producers as well. Okay, next slide. Here's the proposed eligibility for farm to school technical assistance organizations. We define a technical assistance organization as any of the following organization types that have an established history supporting California school food authorities or California educators with implementing farm to school initiatives, or you have an established history supporting California food producers and institutional food procurement. So it's just about your history and your navigating. And what we've realized is that there's a million different types of organization that do this work. So we really try to be flexible here in the types that are proposed: nonprofit orgs, including ag industry nonprofit orgs, tribal-based nonprofits, RCDs, UCANR and UC Cooperative Extension county offices, which I saw, I think it was Jason in here from one of those orgs, public universities in California, California Native American tribes, county agencies and local governments, or projects with a nonprofit fiscal sponsor. So it's pretty flexible there. it is required that any of those technical assistant organizations have a partner with at least, well, for the school food and education bucket, they need to be partnered with at least one California School Food Authority. And for the producer training projects, you have to partner with at least one California School Food Authority and at least one California food producer. So that food producer is just kind of there to provide support and to say, yes, this organization is trusted and they know what they're doing. And the SFA is there to say the same thing. Hey, we trust this organization. We want to work with them. We want to be part of this. There is an important note here that food hubs are not eligible in Track 2 as a technical assistance organization. They play a more direct role in this work, and we're trying to fund them more directly in Track 4 this year. So if you're on here or if you're watching the recording and you're a food hub, know that more info is coming for you in Track 4. Okay. Here's the proposed grant details for Track 2. Again, up to a 2-year project term. The award amounts in here are $50,000 to $500,000. So we'd love your feedback on those numbers. In Track 2, there is no funding formula, so the applicant just chooses what they want, what they think they need. The allowable costs are anything you would need to build school nutrition educator or producer capacity to implement farm to school programs. So California grown food for hands-on education projects, infrastructure, equipment or supplies, staff time, travel time, contractors, indirect, all of that's in there. In Track 2, you can't use the money for school food procurement for meals. That's what Track 1 is for. So if you're partnering with TK through 12 and you need procurement dollars, we really encourage you to look at Track 1 or local food for schools or school food best practices with CDE. Lots of dollars out there now. And then reporting is the same. So beginning interview, pre-survey, final interview, regular financial reporting and tracking all of your spending, and then quarterly check-ins, a survey. And then we'll just call you, see how you're doing, that sort of thing. Okay, next slide. Okay, here's the proposed scoring for Track 2. Again, there's much more specific details in the Track 2 link on the webpage. So we encourage you to really go there. This is just a high level. So there's foundational info, dollar amount request, audience, project team, and letters of support. You just are required to have that. You're required to title and summarize your project. What we want you to do, I'm going to go biggest scoring category to smallest so you can see what's prioritized. 35 points is proposed for your technical assistance work plan. So that's, what are you going to do? That's what we're going to score the most. You get 25 points for targeting the highest need communities, and then 15 points for project team and organizational commitment, 15 points for your experience in the farm to school space, and then 10 points for that budget and sustainability piece. On the right side of the page here, you can see there's the community needs section, includes points for engaging students from underserved communities. That's for the school food and education project category because they're dealing directly with school sites. And then for the producer outreach bucket, it includes the producer types below, which is those prioritized producer groups that we identified. So this goes back to the question from earlier. I think it was Jennifer asked, how are underserved communities defined? In the chat, I'm just going to read it out. It's long, but it's very important. So it's on page 10 of the RFA. It says this program utilizes a few quantitative metrics to measure whether proposed projects will engage students from underserved communities. In tracks 1 and 2, the metrics are free and reduced price meal eligibility rate and the percentage of students in Title I schools. The tiered scoring system that's proposed allocates more points for higher rates of need. In track 3, the metric is the Healthy Places Index percentile ranking of early care and education sites based on the census tract that the sites serve. The tiered scoring system allocates more points for lower percentiles, so that's just like how you read that map. The grant program also considers specific community needs through a question called Making the Case in tracks 1, 2, and 3, which prompts applicants to share about specific challenges that their community faces. Specific challenges may include, but are not limited to, food insecurity rate, child poverty rate, natural disasters such as wildfires and floods, impacts of the pandemic on the community, Cal EnviroScreen 4.0 percentile, historic and or systemic injustices, limited resources, etc. So there's the quantitative metrics where we're like, tell us what the numbers are, but we know the numbers don't always tell the whole story. So then there's this making the case section where you have the opportunity to say, hey, I know the number says 54%, but here's what's actually happening in my community. And here's the data to back that up. So that's what we have proposed for community need. And again, would love feedback on those definitions. Those are things we constantly revisit anytime a new mapping tool comes out, anytime a new report on poverty comes out. We're always looking at these types of figures. Okay. I think that's everything on the scorecard for track 2. That is proposed to come out to 100 points. So we did get that one to 100. So that worked. Okay. Next slide. Oh, for project 2, we normally have, we would want to have a project example on there from past funding. But because the track has evolved more into a technical assistance grant, we don't really have a perfect one-to-one example from past funding rounds that can help us figure it out. So I think if people have questions about that, hey, would my proposed project fall, would my entity fall under the proposed TA track? We can help kind of figure that out here in this, in this public comment period. We're happy to get that feedback and hear those questions. Okay. Okay, track 3 now is the Farm to Early Care and Education Grant. So we've checked off TK through 12. We've looked at the technical assistance. Now we're on early care and education. So track 3 is proposed will fund childcare centers in California and farm to ECE technical assistance organizations to establish new or expand existing farm to ECE projects that procure California grown or produced whole or minimally processed foods for incorporation into meals, snacks, and or food boxes for young children, especially foods from producers that utilize climate smart ag practices, small to mid-sized food producers, veteran food producers, socially disadvantaged food producers, and or, it's getting hard to say, and or limited resource farm households in California. So very similar language there you'll see throughout the program. The projects are also required to have an educational element. So they're required to engage young children in hands-on food education opportunities, especially standards aligned and culturally relevant opportunities led by educators with a child development teacher permit, and that complement the meal program or food box programs procurement efforts. So again, we want to tie together procurement and education here, even in the ECE space. It's also optional if you want to employ farm to ECE staff or offer farm to ECE professional development for staff. So here's the eligibility pool. There's 2 different types of eligible applicant in the ECE grant. There's technical assistance organizations or childcare centers. Childcare centers is easier, so I'm going to start with that one. You're located in California, you provide care all or part of the day, you're single site or multi-site, and you primarily serve young children birth through age 5, and you're licensed through CDSS, or you qualify for a licensed exemption. So that's a childcare center. If you're watching this recording or on here live and are like, I'm a childcare center and I don't fall into that, please reach out to us with a public comment so that we can fix that. We want to make sure that this funding is going to the types of orgs really committed. So please give us those types of notes. The other bucket here is the Farm to ECE Technical Assistant Organization. And the definition of that is any of the following organizations that provides support to ECE providers in California. And there's a bunch of options here. A CACFP sponsor, a Child Care and Development Fund Tribal Lead Agency, a Child Care Resource and Referral Agency, a First 5 County Commission, a Head Start grantee, a nonprofit, a tribal-based nonprofit, an RCD, UC A&R or UC Extension, public universities, California Native American tribes, county agencies, local governments, projects with a nonprofit fiscal sponsor. And then it's required that if you're a technical assistance organization, that you have at least 2 ECE sites in California that are going to partner with you to implement these solutions. Again, what we're doing at the state level is we're saying, we don't know every technical assistance org and who's doing great work. So what we're asking those ECE sites to do by partnering with a technical assistance org, you're saying these are good partners and these are the people that we want to work with. So in that way, you're doing the vetting. So it's really important that you pick your partners well. Okay, next slide. Track 3, the Farm to ECE grant proposed details, the grant term up to 2 years, the award amount $50,000 to $200,000. Again, there's no formula here, so you just get to propose it. And then allowable costs are anything you need to establish or expand farm to ECE programs. That would include California grown food for meals, snacks, and food boxes or hands-on education, infrastructure, equipment, supplies, staff, labor for procuring and processing products, travel, contractors. If a technical assistance org was going to do a mini grant out to their ECE sites that they serve, that's allowable. And then indirect is also allowed. And reporting is the same across all the tracks. A beginning interview where our team meets your team, a pre-survey to get baseline numbers, and then a final interview, regular financial reporting to track all your spending, including procurement spending, and then quarterly check-ins to hear about what's working and what's not. And then here's an example. Oh, sorry, here, I'm out of the order. Here's the scorecard for track 3, again, proposed. Highest scoring categories here are your procurement work plan and budget and your education work plan and budget. So how are you going to implement these projects? They have equal amounts. 25 points for community need, and then 15 points for project team and organizational commitment. So how does this fit into your work? And 10 points for project viability. So how does your budget align with the impact goals in your project? Community need gives points for engaging children from underserved communities, which that whole definition, it includes quantitative and qualitative. We read through it earlier, and it's in the draft RFA on page 10. You can read it there. And then the procurement work plan section includes points for what types of farms are you going to work with? Are they in those priority farm groups, and do they utilize climate smart ag practices? And then the proposed total there is 110 points. Okay, now the project example is the McCarthy Family Child Development and Training Center. They received $200,000 in last year's grant funding, and their project activities include procuring locally grown produce for children's meals, providing food boxes with locally grown foods to families, implementing seasonal food taste tests for children, collaborating with a composting organization to plan and implement a composting system for their center, and including education for staff, children, and families about composting, and then implementing a food-based curriculum for children, including planting, growing, harvesting. So you can see they really wrap together all of the opportunities there to use food as a teaching tool, use it as an economic driver for their local farms. Lots and lots of great things happening in that example. Okay, track 4, here we go, more tea, a lot of talking. Okay, track 4, again, we've gone through all 3 tracks, the K through 12, the partnership and technical assistance grant, the ECE grant. This last one is really looking at the supply side of farm to school. So it's proposed that track 4 will fund California food producers and public serving food aggregation and distribution enterprises to increase production, processing, and/or distribution capacity to sell California grown or produced whole or minimally processed foods to the school food market. Funding in this track will prioritize small to mid-sized food producers, veteran, socially disadvantaged, and/or limited resource food producers, and food producers utilizing climate smart ag practices or production systems. So there's 2 eligibility types, and everyone's going to learn a new vocabulary word today, term today, a new government term. But first we'll start with what is a food producer? The definition that we have developed is a person, group of individuals, nonprofit organization, or a California Native American tribe that leases, rents, or owns land in California and cultivates crops, raises livestock, and/or uses indigenous food production practices on their land. It also includes California seafood harvesters. So that's a food producer, that's one eligible type. of entity for track 4. So if you fall into any of those definitions, cool, apply, great. This other opportunity is called a public serving food aggregation and distribution enterprise. And we pulled this language from existing legislation, but here's our definition for what this means. It's often called a food hub, but people sometimes use other language for what they do, but it's often called a food hub, and it's an entity that serves as a supply chain intermediary for local or regional farms or ranches, particularly those optimizing climate smart ag production practices or methods and following state labor practices. An eligible enterprise must prioritize to the greatest extent possible, but is not limited to serving farms or ranches that are 500 acres or less, cooperatively owned or owned by farmers who are socially disadvantaged beginning with. Additionally, an eligible enterprise must handle 100% California grown products within California, or be able to farm identify sourcing for 100% of products to ensure that state dollars support California farms and ranches. So there's these terms in the food system like distributor, food hub, aggregator, people kind of wholesaler, people kind of mix and match these words throughout the food system. So we're using this term public serving food aggregation and distribution enterprise. One important note here on eligibility, if food producers are in, public serving food aggregation and distribution enterprises are in. However, track 4 does not include school operated gardens and school operated farms. If you're a school operated farm or a school operated garden where a school employee is running that project, then that's eligible in track 1. So use track 1 to advance those projects. If you are a school operated farm, so that's track 1. You're a school employee, you're over there. If you're a contractor or a third party that's supporting a school district farm or supporting school district gardens, then you would be eligible in track 4. So if you're a third party, then you can be in track 4. Andrew has a question in the chat. Can we define climate smart ag practices? It's a broad term and would be great to have clarification so we can determine the best way to describe our practices as farmers and aggregator working farmland. Yes, definitely. And I'm going to have my team pull those big definitions into the chat for me again. It is definitely broad, and there's kind of a lot of layers to it. So we'll pull that in. Okay. So that's proposed eligibility for track 4. Here's what the applicants must do within their projects. They must identify the schools that they plan to work with. And it's required that they're working with at least one California public school district, county office of ed, charter school, or tribal school that's a school food authority, and that they're currently operating the National School Lunch Program. Again, we want these local farms and food businesses to be able to get the access to those federal dollars in the meal program. It's also an option that they're partnering with at least one child care center that currently participates in the child and adult care food program. So if you're a food producer or one of those food businesses, you have to partner with at least one of those SFAs or one ECE site operating CACFP. You also have to provide evidence of collaboration, which is a letter of intent from the director of the school meal program at each school food authority or child care center that you identify as a project partner. So you can't just drop the name of your favorite school district in there. They got to provide a letter of support saying that, yes, we intend to work together. Here's the proposed details. 2-year grant term. The award amounts are between $15,000 and $250,000. So the producer would just say what they need. Allowable costs are anything you would need to increase capacity to sell California grown food to schools, and if desired, provide hands-on food education to schools. Equipment, infrastructure, supplies, any of that sort of stuff. Let me read through it. To establish, so you can do equipment, infrastructure, supplies. You can use funds to establish or enhance your use of climate smart ag practices for your school food sales. You can establish or expand hands-on food education opportunities for students or school staff. on field trips, as long as that complements your food sales to schools. You can use it for staffing costs, that those staff are using their hours dedicated to school food. You can use it for certificates, licenses, or insurance needed if you need to sell food that way. That's what you need. Or travel contractors indirect. We know some farms have to travel a long way to meet with their school partners. So it could cover those costs. Reporting, same across all tracks. Beginning interview, pre-survey, final interview. Regular financial reporting that tracks all your spending, and then quarterly check-in surveys. Okay, and then here's the proposed scorecard. And then Andrew, in the chat, we have the definition of climate smart ag from the draft RFA on page 7. And I'm going to get to that here once I go through the scorecard. And thank you, Rachel has provided a link to it also for anyone who's on here live. Okay, so here's the proposed scorecard. Again, we're going from highest amount of points to lowest amount of points. So 25 points is for your production practices and or aggregation and distribution practices. So that would include applications from producers that utilize climate smart ag practices or climate smart ag production systems. There's much more detail in the actual RFA doc, and we encourage you to go look at it to see how we build up to 25 points. The second highest category on there is 20 points, which is foundational information. So who are you as the producer? Are you a small to mid-sized food producer, or do you fall into one of those priority categories? Next is 15 points. So your project team and your organizational commitment. How committed is your farm or your entity in supporting farm to school, and how does it align with your mission? 15 points for your work plan. And then 10 points for your business history and farm to school history if you have experience with this, and 10 points for project viability. So again, we really encourage you to go into the RFA for track 4, look at this detailed scorecard and provide feedback to help us make sure these points are allocated in the right way. The total opportunity there is 95 points. Okay, here's a project example from last year. McGrath Family Farmers, Inc. They received 150 grand, which is awesome. In 23-24, they would be eligible for up to 250. So you could do even more with that. The project activities include purchasing infrastructure and equipment to scale up farm to school production, growing crops, conserving water, composting, and planting hedgerows were all climate smart ag practices that they added in, and then partnering with their local school districts is on there. So the funding supports whatever it is that you need. My 10-month-old just tried to crawl into the office. Okay, here we go. I'm gonna read through the climate smart ag. Amy, can we go back actually? I wanna read through the climate smart ag practices definition. I know it's not that exciting to have me read a definition that you can all see in the chat, but for the recording and people who are on here who wanna hear what that answer was, I think it's really important. So Andrew Dickinson asked, how do we define climate smart ag? And it's on page 7 of the RFA. And it's long. Climate smart ag practices, climate smart ag production systems, or other regenerative strategies for sustainable pest management. Climate smart ag practices include those defined by the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Services Conservation Practice Standards. So the NRCS CPS standards, and those identified by CDFA's Office of Environmental Farming and Innovation within the Healthy Soils Program, Alternative Manure Management Program, Dairy Digester Research and Development Program, and State Water Enhancement and Efficiency Program. And those are including but not limited to cover cropping, NOAA reduced till, hedgerow plantings, compost application, and prescribed grazing. That's part 1. Part 2, climate smart ag production systems include certified organic or transitioning to certified organic, and other regenerative strategies include those that also increase resilience to climate change, improve the health of communities and soil, protect water and air quality, increase biodiversity, and help store carbon in the soil. Sustainable pest management and examples of sustainable pest management practices are defined in the Sustainable Pest Management Roadmap that the California Department of Pesticide Regulation developed in collaboration with CDFA and the California Environmental Protection Agency. If that's not enough government speak for you, what I would, just that jumble of words, I would really encourage you to look at the track 4 scorecard and look at the specific questions that are being asked. Because you also get more points for being able to verify climate smart ag practices versus just explain them. So there's a lot of information in there. Yeah, thank you, Andrew. So encourage you really go into track 4, look at the questions that are being asked, and see how you can respond. And if you look at them and you're like, that's still not clear to me, then ask a question. You can email us. Okay, thank you. All right, estimated timeline. November 29th through December 14th is the public comment period. We're going to take all of those great comments that we receive. We're going to make edits and updates to this, to these applications and scorecards and whatever it is that you guys share with us. And then we're going to work absolutely as quickly as possible to build our online grant portal and get it up and launched by end of January 2024. So that's our goal. It's a really ambitious goal, I will tell you. If we're not going to hit that goal in January, we will send out an update and say we're working on it. So that's the goal. That's our proposed timeline, is that the application would open in January. Throughout that application period, we're going to do weekly calls where there's opportunities for people to get to ask questions and get more information about the grant. Then March, it's estimated that applications will be due. Depending on how many applications we get, it will take us a certain amount of time to review. 500 applications will not take as long as 5,000 applications. I think you guys get the picture there. And then the award notification announcement will come after that, and the grant term will come after that. So this real timeline is going to come in the final RFA. We have to see how much change we have to make to the grant after your comments. So you're going to get more details there. Okay, and then next slide, Jennifer put is leading us right into it, which is where do we submit our comments? Thank you so much for asking. You can submit them in writing to cafarmtoschool@cdfa.ca.gov, and you just email them in there, and we will put them all in a folder and then say thank you. And that's in the chat also for you to cut and paste. And then also you can visit the program webpage for more information on that, like you lose this link or whatever, it's all on the program webpage. Also, if we have 9 minutes left here, so if people have questions that they want to ask now or comments that they want to leave now, I know everyone has seen these documents for like 24 hours, but if you have comments now, we can do that. Okay, and the best way to get your questions answered will be to do what Jennifer and Jacob and Andrew have done, which is just put them in the chat. Or if you'd prefer to just ask it out loud, you can go to the reactions feature at the bottom, click reactions and raise hand if you want to go that way. So the first question I see in the chat is from Jacob. Hi, Jacob, thank you. What parameters do you use to distribute awards geographically across California to the extent possible? We map every single application that was submitted to us, and then we see if they're distributed. And then we try to distribute them. And so in the first year of grant funding, there were no awards in the northern part of the state. There weren't even any applications really past the Chico area. So in the second year of funding, we wanted to make sure that awards made it up to the North State so that there was opportunity for farm to school to grow everywhere. So it really is a read and react if you're a sports person. But we see how many apps were submitted and then do our best to make sure that every part of California has farm to school. Yeah, thank you. Okay, and then the next one is from Sarah. Hi, Sarah. For track 4, can a producer be partnered with universities, or is this just for K-12 partnerships? It's just for K-12 or a child care center in that space. Yeah. So not universities. But if you want it to be universities, these are proposed answers. So you could put that in there, that this is a great program, we love it so much, and also we should include universities. That would be great. Okay, Jessica, a question. I'm sure it will make more sense once I'm able to read through the whole RFA. I'm a little unsure of which track would fit our project best, and I'm unsure if this is the correct form to ask. So this is a very common question on what would I be eligible for and what would I be eligible to do. We tried to make eligibility a little bit more clear this year. But if you email the inbox and just say, hey, I'm this type of business, I want to do these types of things, which proposed category would I fall into at this current time? Then we could tell you under the current guidelines, you could fall into this or this, and we'll give you the feedback there that way. Yeah, of course. Okay, Jennifer, we have had people describe our rural LEA location as food desert. Is there a definition for this term that CDFA and Farm to School uses? I don't think we have one defined in the RFA, but I think the USDA has a food desert definition. I'm looking at Amy, do you know? Because we don't have one defined in the RFA, we would just request that if you're planning to use one in that make the case section, that you just cite where you got the definition from. And if it's from the USDA, say the USDA defines a food desert as this, and we are that. So you could do that. Or let's say you have done some sort of survey of all the food business types based on where people live, and you've done the research, then you could just cite your own research. That would be okay too. It's all about you accurately reflecting your community. Okay, question from Amanda. For track 4, if there are producers working together as a collaborative, would it make sense to make that collaboration clear in the separate applications? Might that increase the chance of all 4 producers being funded? So let's say there's 4 producers, you have a collaborative CSA for this entity. So this is where it gets interesting within track 4. Under the current guidelines, which are proposed, right? So first, what I would like you to do is read through that track 4 scorecard and see if it makes sense. And then you give us feedback on that. And then it will really be up to you based on the final scorecard to see what you think has better odds of getting funded. It is totally possible that if 4 separate producers apply as individual producers, that they could all receive funding. And it's also possible that if you applied as the collaborative operation as a food aggregation and distribution enterprise, because a CSA is an aggregation and distribution enterprise, that could be eligible as that type of entity also. So I really encourage you at this point to help us think what you're thinking. There's so much confusion around this. In the past, we haven't even tried to define that term because of this sort of thing. Like a 4-farmer CSA is a lot different than, a 200-farm food hub, for example. So lots of variation there. I know that's not that helpful, Amanda. So please reach out to us. We might have to set up a quick convo to make sure we get it. All right, Lori Lee, for track 2, can we define farm to school experience? That's best defined. It's just in the questions that we ask. It's like, how long have you been doing farm to school? And what have you accomplished? Anything? It's like something like that. So I'd really encourage in track 2 to just look at the specific track 2 link on the web page, and then see what that scorecard is asking for. That's the best way, I think, to look at it. So it asks for how many years have you been doing it, that sort of thing. Okay, Amanda, thank you. Thank you. All right, and then Lance. Hi, Lance. For track 1, if we have some school sites with adequate farm to school infrastructure and other sites with absolutely none, is it acceptable to include a proposal across these varied ability school sites? Totally, yes. Definitely encouraged for you to customize your project to meet the reality for you on the ground. And what we would ask is just that you explain that in the narrative of the grant and in your work plan. So you might have to break it out in your work plan that at this site, and this site, we're going to be doing this, while at this site, and this site, we're going to be doing that. And again, that's all proposed. So take a look at the scorecard and let us know if that makes sense. And if you feel like there will be a space in the application for you to just explain that, or if there needs to be a space made for that type of context to be given.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, of course. Okay, any other questions here or comments while we have them? Well, while we're all here live? I got to tell you, I practiced this last night. It only took 30 minutes. So I don't know what happened today. Too many questions, too much reading. But I'm really grateful for you all for sticking around. I know the tracks are varied and new. Jennifer, can we have access to the slide deck? Yes, definitely. And Amy, will that go on the website or will we email it out? Yes, to the website. So that'll be posted on the website with the recording. Yeah. Okay, thank you all. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you everyone for being here. We're super excited. The next info session is December 6th. So we encourage you to bring your partners to those things on the 6th. I call this the this is like a movie trailer for the real thing's going to come out later. So you got to get it on people's radars now. Okay, and then Melanie, I see a question. Do you recommend a site that guides on how to write a grant? I can't recommend one in particular. I think look at the application questions and that are proposed, and then don't let yourself be intimidated. We're here to help you. We try to ask very, very clear, short questions. And if there's ever a time where it's like, pull this data from this source, we'll provide you the link to anything like that. So I would say, look at those application questions now, see if they're confusing or if they make sense to you, and then let us know if you have questions on any of it. Yeah. Okay, 10:59, we did it, folks. Thank you all. So the next one's December 6th. Hope to see you all there. All right, thanks everyone. Have a good day.